Good evening, insomniacs, night shifters, and mythological misfits. Welcome back to my cozy, slightly unhinged corner of the internet, where bedtime stories are less about counting sheep and more about counting the number of times the Greek gods should have been sent to family therapy. Before we tuck in, show some love by liking the video and subscribing. Only if your heart truly desires it. No divine coercion here. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I'm always delighted to know which time zone is most haunted by my voice. Now get your room just right. Lights low, maybe a fan humming like a distant cyclops snoring. Sink into whatever passes for comfort tonight, because we're diving headfirst into the glorious, chaotic mess that is the Olympian family. Let's start at the top of this celestial food chain with Zeus, the thunder-hurling CEO of Mount Olympus, and walking proof that too much power will turn your family tree into a tangled ball of drama. Zeus was the youngest child of Cronus and Rhea. Cronus, in a stunning display of parenting, responded to the prophecy that one of his kids would overthrow him by swallowing each newborn whole. That's not a metaphor, that's literally what he did. Imagine your dad's idea of childcare is to turn you into a midnight snack. Rhea, understandably not a fan of this approach, pulled off the old switcheroo. She presented Cronus with a rock wrapped in swaddling clothes, which he gulped down without so much as a suspicious glance. I think we can all agree, attention to detail was not Cronus's strong suit. Meanwhile, real baby Zeus was spirited away to a cave on Crete, where he was raised by nymphs and a goat. Not a sentence you hear every day. But that's Greek mythology for you. If you're not being raised by livestock, are you even a future god? Fast forward a couple of decades, and Zeus is all grown up, ready to commit some justified patricide. He orchestrates a rebellion, slices open Cronus's stomach. Freud, please call your office, and out-tumble his fully grown siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter. Nothing says family reunion like emerging from your father's digestive tract. The original dysfunctional dynasty was now assembled, and they promptly launched the Titanomachy, a decade-long, all-out celestial brawl against the Titans. Spoiler, the Olympians win. Zeus, as the leader, claims the sky and the role of supreme deity. He becomes the master of storms, the upholder of cosmic order, justice, and oaths. At least, that's what's on his resume. In practice, Zeus spends most of his divine hours transforming into every animal on the Greek farm, usually to chase after women who very much do not want to be chased. Swans, bulls, eagles, showers of gold. If you can name it, Zeus has probably shapeshifted into it and made things awkward for everyone. Picture your country's top judge morphing into a goose to flirt with mortals. That's Zeus, but with more lightning and fewer ethical boundaries. His romantic escapades were a never-ending reality show. He married Hera, his sister, because apparently the family tree was more of a circle, and still managed to rack up a roll call of affairs that would make even the most notorious celebrities blush. Goddesses, nymphs, mortals, possibly a few sentient houseplants. Zeus left behind a trail of demigod children, each with their own epic saga and a host of abandonment issues. Honestly, entire Greek city-states were founded just so his offspring would have somewhere to go sulk about their parental trauma. But Zeus wasn't pure chaos. Every now and then, he did the job he was supposed to do. He was the divine referee, enforcing oaths, upholding the law, occasionally smiting mortals who got too cocky for his liking. He could be just, fair, even protective. He could also be petty, vindictive, and more than a little trigger-happy with the lightning bolts. Zeus was the paradox in chief, respected, feared, worshipped, and perpetually causing Olympus's public relations department to pull their hair out. He was the ultimate contradiction, protector and predator, judge and walking punchline, absolute monarch with the emotional stability of a caffeinated squirrel. Let's move on to Hera, goddess of marriage, family, and childbirth. Pause and appreciate the irony. The divine patron of matrimony, locked in an eternal train wreck of a marriage. She's both Zeus's wife and sister. Greek gods never let a family tree get in the way of romance. Their wedding was supposed to be the celestial model of sacred union. Instead, it became an endless soap opera, complete with infidelity, revenge, and an alarming number of people getting turned into animals, trees, or geological features. Hera's power was undeniable. She was the queen of the gods, and she wielded her authority with a laser focus, especially when it came to vengeance. Not on Zeus, mind you. That would be too straightforward. Hera's wrath fell on the women Zeus seduced, or, to be honest, abducted, and their unfortunate offspring. She once transformed a rival into a cow, cursed another to only speak in echoes, and, in a particularly creative move, tried to assassinate baby Hercules with a pair of snakes in the nursery. To be clear, Hercules was not her biological son, but that didn't stop her from unleashing her inner Bond villain. It's difficult to blame Hera entirely. Imagine being the goddess of marriage while your husband invents new forms of animal-based pickup artistry. Still, her go-to coping mechanism was less healthy communication and more eternal curses and mythological vendettas. Therapy didn't exist in the ancient world. Revenge was the next best option. Yet Hera wasn't all about holding grudges. She was also a fierce protector of women during childbirth, a champion of marriage's theoretical sanctity, and a punisher of mortals who broke their oaths. She had temples, priests, and a dedicated cult. Cities like Argos and Samos worshipped her as a major pillar of divine order. In short, Hera was the goddess you prayed to if your spouse was faithful, and the one you blamed when your life turned into an ancient Greek episode of Mori. She is a fascinating contradiction, the embodiment of dignity and power, in a system that regularly made her the butt of the joke. Hera's story isn't just jealousy. It's about a woman supposed to represent unity, holding Olympus together with a mixture of grit, spite, and an unmatched flair for decorative rage. Now let's take a salty detour to Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, storms, and why not, horses? Because nothing says ocean deity like a herd of galloping stallions. Poseidon was one of the three main brothers. Zeus got the sky, Hades got the underworld, and Poseidon got anything wet, which suited him just fine. He ruled the oceans, commanded creatures both beautiful and monstrous, and wielded a trident, a three-pronged rage stick capable of turning a city into beachfront property with a single jab. Poseidon was both adored and dreaded. Sailors begged him for safe passage, fishermen made offerings, and city planners prayed he wouldn't flood their real estate out of spite. But let's be honest, Poseidon was the original unpredictable uncle at the family reunion. Sometimes generous, sometimes devastating, always a little salty. One day he's creating new islands, the next he's flooding your crops because someone skipped his name during the goat sacrifice. He once slammed his trident into the earth so hard out of pettiness that he triggered an earthquake, just because he lost a city naming contest to Athena. She offered the people of Athens an olive tree. He offered a saltwater spring. They chose olives. He chose vengeance. That's Poseidon in a nutshell. His love life was a churning tempest of its own. Nymphs, mortals, and in one infamous incident, Medusa, whose fate says a lot about which gods got to walk away from their messes without consequence. Classic Poseidon. Disaster in his wake, but never a hair out of place. Yet Poseidon was more than a walking temper tantrum. He protected sailors, built cities, and in his calmer moods brought prosperity and fertility. Ancient Greeks depended on him, even as they feared his next mood swing. Like the sea itself, Poseidon was essential, always one storm away from reminding everyone who was really in charge. And now, let's descend minus literally to Hades, lord of the underworld. Not hell, exactly, but a vast grey kingdom where all souls clock out for eternity. Despite modern villain upgrades, Hades wasn't evil. He wasn't even especially cruel, just terminally exhausted by the antics of his family and his job. Zeus got the sky. Poseidon got the ocean. Hades drew the short straw and got stuck as the universe's eternal customer service manager for the dead. His domain, also known as Hades, because even gods understood the value of personal branding, was a realm of shadows. It was divided into areas for the heroic, called Elysium, for the average, known as Asphodel, and for the truly wretched, a region named Tartarus, which was essentially ancient Greece's version of detention. Hades ruled over it all, with a brooding, businesslike authority. He didn't deal in lightning bolts or dramatic flair, and you'd never catch him throwing loud, divine parties. Instead, he was more like the quiet, grim uncle who managed the afterlife's logistics, making sure no soul tried to sneak out the back door. Think of him as the ultimate middle manager, if your office happened to be haunted by the dead. Now, the story of Persephone. Yes, Hades abducted her, which is a massive yikes. But in the universe's weirdest plot twist, they grew into a functional, oddly stable marriage. Persephone spent half the year with him, bringing a certain springtime to the underworld, and the other half on Earth, bringing literal spring. Less a romance, more a divine timeshare agreement. Hades was also the original pet dad. His dog Cerberus had 3 heads, a bad attitude, and 0 obedience skills, but did a passable job keeping souls in line. Unlike his brothers, Hades didn't cheat, didn't rage, didn't want the spotlight. That's why the Greeks rarely built temples for him. They were terrified he might actually show up. He was the somber goth uncle. Everyone respected, but never invited to the family barbecue, preferring to keep a safe, respectful distance. So, as you drift off tonight, keep this in mind. The Olympian family wasn't exactly a model of divine order. They were more like cosmic group therapy gone off the rails. And yet their stories, chaotic, contradictory, and deeply human, still shape how we think about power, love, and what it means to try, and often fail, to hold everything together. Next up, we're trading lightning bolts and tridents for helmets and olive branches. Athena is the goddess of wisdom, war strategy, handicrafts, and staying 10 steps ahead of everyone without breaking a sweat. Stick around for gods who fight with their brains instead of their emotional baggage. Athena, queen of logic and unflappable poise, is what happens when wisdom gets fed up with drama and decides to rule the war room. She commands strategy, crafts, and the unnerving ability to outmaneuver literally everyone, all while wearing a helmet that says, "I have absolutely no time for your feelings." Imagine the only adult in a family of immortal toddlers, and you're halfway to understanding her vibe. Her birth? Oh, it's a classic Olympian fever dream. Zeus, king of questionable decisions, heard a prophecy that his unborn daughter with Metis would one day outthink him, so naturally he swallowed Metis whole. Problem solved, right? Except Zeus's temple started pounding, and instead of reaching for Tylenol, he called in Hephaestus for a little cranial carpentry. One hammer to the skull later, out sprang Athena, fully grown, clad in battle armor, and already rolling her eyes at the chaos. She surveyed Olympus, unimpressed, as if to say, "This is the best you all could manage?" Athena wasted no time establishing her boundaries. Unlike her battle-happy brother Ares, whose idea of strategy is hit it until it stops moving, Athena viewed war as a chess game, not a bar brawl. Where ours is a Molotov cocktail, Athena is a spreadsheet, a flowchart, and a backup plan, all sharpened to a fine, intimidating point. Even her guild in arts and crafts comes with a competitive edge. Weaving, for Athena, wasn't just domestic, it was a battlefield in miniature. Ask Arachne, the ill-fated mortal who challenged the goddess to a weaving contest. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, maybe even better than Athena's, but humility was not on the menu. For her trouble, Arachne got transformed into a spider, condemned to weave in the corners of ceilings forever. Take it as a warning. In Greek myths, outshining a god is a fast track to an awkward new lifestyle. Romance? Athena ghosted that entire category. While the rest of Olympus was busy seducing mortals, marrying siblings, or transforming into surprisingly creative barnyard animals, Athena maintained a strict calendar of city guarding, hero coaching, and owl parenting. She guided Odysseus home, handed Perseus a mirror for snipping Medusa, and probably annotated the Iliad with 30 pages of critical notes. She is the goddess you want on your startup team, your debate squad, and your apocalypse planning committee. She does not raise her voice. She does not manipulate. She simply wins, quietly, every time. Now, let's flip the coin. Enter Ares, the god of war, blood, and the eternal temptation to yell YOLO in the middle of a battlefield. If Athena is the war room with color-coded maps, Ares is the broken bar stool and a fistful of teeth. He doesn't strategize, he charges. He's chaos in bronze armor. And if you hear his name, it's already too late for a refund. Ars is the living embodiment of battle's messiest moments. The smoke, the screaming, the missing helmets, the general confusion about who's supposed to be on which side. If your favorite part of war is nobody knows what's going on, but it's definitely loud, Ares is your guy. He was not, to put it mildly, beloved among the gods. Zeus once called Ares the most hateful deity on Olympus, which is rich coming from Zeus, whose own resume includes lightning-based revenge, serial infidelity, and at least 3 animal transformations per month. If you make Zeus look stable, you're playing on hard mode. Ares was brash, egotistical, and about as subtle as a chariot on fire. The Greeks, fans of cunning, restraint, and maybe a bit of sneakiness, mostly saw Ares as a cautionary tale. Don't be that guy. He rarely won with tactics. Usually he just charged in swinging, which sometimes worked, but just as often left a battlefield full of corpses and a lot of deeply annoyed gods and mortals. Still, let's not underestimate him. Ares was terrifying in his element, the original lord of fear itself. His children Phobos and Deimos literally became the personifications of panic and terror, which is what happens when you let your parental example be start fights and see who cries first. Ares loved being knee-deep in the carnage, and you couldn't say he was ever bored. He did, however, find the time for extracurricular activities, namely an affair with Aphrodite. Now, this romance sounds glamorous until you remember that her husband, Hephaestus, caught them in an invisible net, and the entire pantheon showed up for a live roast. If you ever wonder what counted as reality TV for the ancients, it was probably this. The Romans, always eager for a rebrand, remade Ares as Mars, a more dignified and disciplined god, less shrieking chaos, more honor-bound warrior. But in Greece, Ares stayed the muscle-bound avatar of bad decisions and spectacular violence, and yet, in war's shadow, he remained both feared and begrudgingly respected. Soldiers made sacrifices to Ares, hoping he'd grant them strength, or at the very least ignore them long enough to survive another day. And to be fair, he had a signature style, a chariot pulled by fire-breathing horses, flames and smoke trailing behind. It's impossible to deny, that's at least one point in the cool column. So in the grand war room of the gods, Athena is the relentless strategist, the quiet architect of victory, while Ares is the wild card who brings chaos and terror. Win or lose, together, they embody the two faces of conflict, the mind and the maelstrom, the plan and the punchline. And with that, the Olympian family tree only gets weirder from here. Ready to meet the goddess of romantic disasters, the world's most disgruntled blacksmith, the original messenger boy, and the queen of agricultural anxiety? Because next up, we tumble headfirst into the stories of Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Hermes, and Demeter. Trust me, things are about to get messy. Aphrodite was the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and romantic messes with extremely high body counts. Let's pull back the dark velvet curtain of Olympus and meet 4 gods who, if they were at a dinner party, would never make it through dessert without someone crying, someone laughing, and at least one magical object getting broken. First up, Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, desire, and the kind of romantic chaos that makes reality TV look tame. If you've ever watched someone fall desperately in love with exactly the wrong person, at exactly the wrong time, you've probably witnessed Aphrodite's handiwork in action. She's the patron saint of every impulsive text at 2 a.m., every forbidden office romance, every love triangle that leaves everyone slightly traumatized. Now, the origin story of Aphrodite is a choose-your-own trauma adventure. In one version, she's the daughter of Zeus and Dione. Straightforward, if you ignore the whole Zeus can't stop parent-trapping the cosmos thing. But the older and infinitely less romantic version? Buckle up. In this telling, Aphrodite emerges fully grown from sea foam after Uranus. The primordial sky god gets his godly bits severed by his own son Cronus and tossed into the ocean. Yes, you heard that right. The goddess of love was born from a cosmic act of violence and salt water. It's poetic, if your idea of poetry involves generational trauma and aquatic metaphors. And yet, despite her origins, Aphrodite appears in Olympus radiating a kind of beauty so intense it causes everyone, gods, mortals, the occasional passing satyr, to lose their grip on logic. She doesn't just walk into a room, she destabilizes the emotional climate. She owns a magical belt, the cestus, which makes her literally irresistible to anyone who catches sight of her. It's like having a perfume that guarantees instant infatuation, no matter how questionable your personality. Unfair? Absolutely. But this is Olympus, where cheating is considered a competitive sport. But for a goddess who personifies desire, Aphrodite's own love life is, shall we say, a masterclass in bad decisions. She's officially married to Hephaestus, the god of fire and blacksmithing, a man who builds literal palaces with his bare hands. But her real passion? That would be Ares, the god of war and walking red flag. Apparently, nothing says relationship goals like cheating on your steady, hard-working spouse with the most volatile guy in the room. The scandalous affair isn't just whispered about, it gets full-on exposed. Hephaestus, ever the craftsman, forges a golden net so fine and strong that it traps Aphrodite and Ares mid-romance. He then invites the rest of the gods to come have a look, because in ancient Greece, revenge and public shaming go together like wine and questionable decisions. It's the world's most awkward intervention, and yet no one seems to learn anything from it. But before you write Aphrodite off as pure chaos, let's remember she also has a softer side. She encourages new lovers, blesses weddings, and brings beauty into a world that often forgets what that looks like. If you've ever blurted out a confession of love, or tried to charm your way out of trouble, odds are you were invoking her. She's the goddess people pray to when they need to win a heart, or talk their way past a disaster of their own making. Of course, Aphrodite isn't above starting wars when it suits her. She's the one who offered Helen of Troy to Paris as a bribe in a divine beauty contest, plunging the world into a decade-long conflict, just so she could snag a golden apple labeled, "To the fairest." Imagine risking the fate of civilizations for a trophy. But then, that's what happens when your divine brand is desire without consequences. Aphrodite, beautiful, intoxicating, and spectacularly disinterested in mortal notions of loyalty and stability. Now, let's slide down the marble hallway to Hephaestus, the god of fire, metalwork, and the thankless task of fixing everyone else's magical disasters. Hephaestus is the only Olympian who actually works for a living. While his siblings and in-laws are out chasing mortals or flinging lightning bolts like they're at a cosmic rave, Hephaestus is in his forge building weapons, repairing thrones, and muttering about overtime. His origin story: nobody comes out looking great. In one version, he's born deformed, and Hera, his mother, is so appalled she throws him off Mount Olympus like a piece of rejected luggage. In another version, Zeus is the one who does the tossing after a marital spat. Either way, Hephaestus falls from the heavens, lands hard, and ends up with a limp and abandonment issues the size of Crete. But Hephaestus doesn't claw his way back to Olympus through forgiveness and family therapy. No, he does it with strategy. He crafts Hera a golden throne that, surprise, locks her in place the moment she sits down. The other gods plead with him to come back and release her, and he agrees, on one condition: let him back into the divine club. He negotiates his way home using the only currency that matters on Olympus: leverage. From that point on, Hephaestus is the divine handyman. He forges Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, Achilles' armor, basically every shiny enchanted thing that anyone brags about in myth. If it glows, flies, or explodes, odds are Hephaestus made it, probably while running on zero sleep and pure spite. And yet, for all his skill and genius, Hephaestus is routinely disrespected. His marriage to Aphrodite is arranged, not chosen, and she doesn't even try to hide her preference for Ares. His family is at best emotionally unavailable, and at worst actively hostile. His co-workers constantly breaking the things he just fixed, then blaming it on magic. But here's the thing: Hephaestus isn't the type to explode like Ares or plot like Hera. His revenge is creative, elegant, and deeply passive-aggressive. That famous net he used to catch Aphrodite and Ares, artisan crafted, impossibly fine, and designed for maximum public humiliation. It's both practical and poetic, equal parts trap and performance art. Hephaestus may not get the glamour or the glory, but he's the god who literally built Olympus. He's the unsung hero, the patron of blacksmiths, inventors, and everyone who's ever fixed a broken appliance using duct tape and a lot of swearing. If the gods had a blue-collar union, he'd be its president and only dues-paying member. Now, let's lace up our winged sandals and sprint over to Hermes, the god of travelers, commerce, thieves, and the kind of fast-talking mischief that makes lawyers nervous. Hermes is the original multitasker, always on the move, always 3 steps ahead, and always ready with a clever excuse. He's the guy with the winged sandals, a stylish hat, and an aura that says, "I've already tricked you, and you don't even know it yet." Unlike most gods, Hermes doesn't take centuries to make his mark on the world. On the very day he's born, he sneaks out of his cradle, steals Apollo's cattle, invents the lyre out of a tortoise shell, and then returns to his crib before anyone notices. That's his first morning. Other gods might spend their infancy napping. Hermes is busy launching his brand. Officially, Hermes is the messenger of the gods, but that title hardly does him justice. He delivers messages, yes, but he also smuggles souls into the underworld, guides heroes through enemy territory, and probably invented the divine version of overnight shipping. If there's trouble brewing, Hermes has already left a note, a loophole, and an alibi. He's also the god of commerce and trade, which is rich, considering he's also the god of thieves. Only in Greece do you get a patron saint for both the bustling marketplace and the guy picking your pocket. Hermes embodies negotiation, persuasion, and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether your business is legal, less so. But don't let the trickster persona fool you. Hermes can be fiercely loyal when it matters. He helps Odysseus outwit Circe, hands Perseus the gear he needs to face Medusa, and gently guides souls to the next world with a surprising tenderness. Beneath the pranks and schemes, there's a god who takes his responsibilities seriously, at least the ones he cares about. Hermes' signature accessory is the caduceus, a winged staff entwined with 2 snakes. It's often mistaken for the symbol of medicine, which is hilarious because Hermes' main qualifications are speed, trickery, and a flexible relationship to the truth. If Olympus had an IT department, Hermes would be the guy who solves your problem in 5 minutes, explains nothing, and leaves with your lunch money. He's clever, unreliable, and impossible not to love. The god of getting things done, getting away with it, and making sure you never get a straight answer in return. If you've ever talked your way out of a parking ticket, you owe Hermes a thank you note you should probably mail anonymously. And now for a sharp mood swing. Let's visit Demeter, goddess of the harvest, agriculture, and the world's most powerful seasonal affective disorder. Demeter is the reason civilization has bread, fruit, and anything remotely green. When she's content, the world bursts with abundance. When she's upset, everything withers. The original don't mess with mum energy. Demeter's approach to power is quiet, but absolute. She doesn't need lightning bolts or dramatic transformations. She just stops the crops from growing. Global famine as a mood. You'd think the other gods would tread carefully, but this is Olympus, a land of zero boundaries. Enter Persephone, Demeter's beloved daughter and literal flower child. One sunny afternoon, Persephone is out picking flowers when the earth splits open and Hades, god of the underworld and professional abductor, whisks her away. Greek mythology, not big on healthy family dynamics. Demeter's grief is volcanic. She searches the world, refusing to let anything grow until her daughter is returned. Crops fail, animals starve, and humans begin to panic. Mortals plead for mercy, but Demeter's answer is simple. No Persephone, no produce. If you've ever wondered why hangry is a thing, look no further than Demeter's existential hunger strike. Eventually, Zeus intervenes. Not out of compassion, but because the mortals are dying and no one's offering sacrifices. A deal is struck. Persephone will split her time between Hades and Demeter. Thus the seasons are born. Spring and summer, Demeter is reunited with her daughter, and the world flourishes. Fall and winter, she mourns, and everything fades. So, one of the most crucial cycles in human history, the very reason we have seasons, comes down to a mother's grief and a custody arrangement brokered by a deeply dysfunctional family. Global agriculture, powered by emotional blackmail. Greek myth, where therapy is always overdue. Demeter also has a complicated sense of justice. She once taught humanity how to plant wheat and build cities, then turned around and incinerated a royal baby because the parents interrupted her mid-ritual. It's a fine line between nurturing earth goddess and terrifying witch. You never quite know which side of the line you're on until it's too late. Yet at her heart, Demeter stands for nurture, resilience, and the deep, unbreakable bond between mother and child. She brings life from the ground and can take it away just as quickly. She is both the provider and the withholder, the reason we feast and the reason, sometimes, we go hungry. So, there you have it. Aphrodite, the divine chaos agent of romance. Hephaestus, the unsung builder with a toolkit and a grudge. Hermes, the fleet-footed trickster with a soft spot for lost souls. And Demeter, the mother whose moods shape the turning of the earth itself. Olympus, a place where love, craft, mischief, and harvest all collide, reshaping the world with every petty squabble and impossible yearning. These gods show us that power isn't always flashy lightning or epic battles. Sometimes it's heartbreak, or a clever workaround, or a field suddenly gone barren. And as we leave these 4 Olympians behind, the party is just getting started, because next up we're about to enter the divine after hours, where wine flows, wild ideas spark, and independence reigns. Dionysus is the god of wine, revelry, fertility, theatre, madness, and those questionable decisions you make after your 3rd glass of whatever he's pouring. So top off your goblet, because the next chapter is about to get a little wild. Let's set the stage. You're at a party so wild. The neighbours are calling the cops, but the cops have already joined in. There's music, masks, and just a hint that someone might transform into a vine before sunrise. This is Dionysus's domain, the god of wine, revelry, theatre, fertility, and those questionable decisions you only admit to your therapist. Picture him draped in grapevines and leopard skins, perpetually buzzed, and yes, possibly accompanied by an actual panther. Dionysus is the original party crasher, the divine YOLO incarnate, and the reason your ancient Greek therapist was always fully booked. But Dionysus's origin story, oh, it's peak Greek drama. His mother, Semele, was a mortal who had the poor judgment to hook up with Zeus. Never a good move for one's longevity. When Hera, Zeus's Olympian wife and part-time goddess of suspicious wives everywhere, found out, she disguised herself and convinced Semele to demand that Zeus reveal his true godly form. Spoiler alert, seeing Zeus unleashed is not like seeing your boyfriend with bedhead. Semele was vaporized on the spot, leaving Zeus in a rare display of paternal multitasking to sew the unborn Dionysus into his own thigh. Yes, you heard that right, thigh pregnancy. Only in Greek mythology does this sort of thing not even crack the top 10 weirdest moments. After being born again from Zeus's leg, Dionysus spent his youth wandering the earth, spreading the gospel of wine and ecstatic freedom. His entourage resembled the aftermath of a music festival. Satyrs, maenads, nymphs, woodland misfits, and anyone willing to risk a hangover for a shot at immortality. His parties were less wine-tasting and more identity-losing, clothing optional, theatre kid fever dream. Picture Burning Man, but the only thing burning is your grip on sanity, and the consequences are mythic. Dionysian rituals were about dissolving boundaries, letting go of your inhibitions, and sometimes your dignity. Yet for all his party god hype, Dionysus was a master of paradox. He could be outrageously fun, but also terrifyingly vengeful, mock his cult, refuse his offerings, or interrupt his festival, and you'd quickly regret it. Take King Pentheus, who tried to ban Dionysus's worship. He ended up torn apart in a frenzy of divine madness. Or the king who got turned into a dolphin for disrespect. Dionysus didn't do subtle. His punishments were performance art, part cosmic justice, part ancient Greek PSA. But here's the twist. Dionysus was also the god of outsiders, the patron of misfits, and the comforter of those shunned by polite society. He offered sanctuary to the broken and silenced, gave a voice to the marginalized, and occasionally transformed people into grapevines, because symbolism is always on the menu. Dionysus is the living contradiction of liberation and chaos, ecstasy and destruction. He inspires creativity one moment and lures you into existential crisis the next, leaving you barefoot in a vineyard pondering the meaning of life and your next drink. Next, we trade in our party mask for a bow and quiver and step into the moonlit forests of Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, wild animals and moonlight. Artemis is the patron saint of no, I will not explain myself, and yes, I can outrun you. She's often pictured with her iconic bow and a pack of wolves, her presence as chill and sharp as a winter night. Unlike her thunderbolt-slinging relatives, Artemis didn't need flashy power moves. She had precision, discipline, and zero patience for nonsense. Born as the twin sister of Apollo, Artemis set her own standards from the very beginning. She helped deliver her brother just after her own birth, then immediately declared herself done with men. Romance, hard pass. Marriage, not even a little. Artemis preferred the company of her loyal maidens and the deep, untamed wild. Her forests were her sanctuary, and drama was strictly against the rules. Artemis's purity wasn't about prudishness. It was about autonomy. Touch her boundaries and you might find yourself transformed. Literally. Take Actaeon, the unfortunate hunter who accidentally glimpsed Artemis bathing. Instead of an awkward conversation, Artemis turned him into a stag. His own dogs handled the rest. The message was loud, clear, and fatal. Respect my space or become a cautionary tale. While other Olympians treated mortals like playthings or pawns, Artemis was fiercely protective of the vulnerable, especially women and children. Harm the innocent or desecrate sacred nature, and her retribution landed swiftly, usually with poetic and terminal finality. As a moon goddess, Artemis illuminated darkness, guiding travelers both literally and metaphorically. If Apollo was the blazing sun, Artemis was the cool, silent moon. Less warmth, more watchfulness, and not above letting you wander lost if you annoyed her. In today's terms, Artemis is the OG independent woman. She didn't care for Olympus politics or anyone's opinions. She lived free, wild, and unapologetically herself. You didn't challenge Artemis. You didn't flirt. You simply hoped she wasn't aiming in your direction. She's the mythic equivalent of Do Not Disturb mode, permanently enabled. And then, we have Apollo. If the Olympians were a dysfunctional office, Apollo would be the overachieving golden boy with a resume that crashes the HR system. Sun god, patron of music, prophecy, healing, poetry, archery. If there was a job opening, Apollo had already claimed it. He's the radiant twin to Artemis, all golden hair and blinding charisma, driving the sun across the sky each day in a flaming chariot. No pressure if you oversleep, right? But under that dazzling facade is a bundle of contradictions. Apollo is both brilliant and deeply insecure. He's the guy who cries over breakups, but also curses his exes. Take Daphne, pursued relentlessly by Apollo. She chose transformation into a laurel tree to escape him. Apollo, undeterred, made her his sacred symbol and wore her leaves as a crown. Therapy, anyone? Apollo's relationship with love is messy, dramatic, and often ends in creative overkill. When his beloved Hyacinthus died, possibly due to Apollo's own discus mishap, Apollo mourned by transforming the boy into a flower. It's sweet if you ignore the part where the flower is basically a memorial to accidental manslaughter. As the god of prophecy, Apollo technically knows how things will end, yet still manages to be surprised and devastated when they do. His oracle at Delphi was the ancient world's top advice column, dispensing cryptic riddles that somehow became everyone's destiny. Think fortune cookies, but more ominous. Apollo could both heal and harm, curing plagues or causing them depending on how his day was going. He was power-wrapped in poetry. light tinged with insecurity, and charm with a hair-trigger temper. He'd serenade you at lunch, then shoot you for not clapping. But let's not forget the quiet heart of Olympus, Hestia. She's the goddess of the hearth, home, and plain old domestic peace. If every other Olympian is embroiled in soap opera-level drama, Hestia is the one keeping the coffee warm and the lights on. She's the eldest child of Cronus and Rhea, the original sibling who got swallowed whole by their paranoid dad, and, in a twist of weird myth logic, ended up both the oldest and youngest Olympian when Zeus forced Cronus to spit his kids back out. While her siblings waged wars, threw curses, or pursued mortals with questionable boundaries, Hestia opted out. No power struggles, no scandals, no divine flings. She was even offered an official throne on Olympus and gave it away so she could tend the eternal flame and avoid family drama. That's goddess-level boundaries. Hestia presided over the hearth, the center of every home, temple and city. Her presence was felt wherever a fire burned for warmth, food, or ritual. She had no temples dedicated solely to her, no outrageous myths, just a quiet, indispensable presence making everything else possible. Hestia was also the goddess of hospitality. In a world where shelter and food were basic survival, she represented the sacred duty of caring for guests. Light her fire, keep it burning, and your bread wouldn't burn. And maybe, just maybe, your relatives would leave on time. Unlike her siblings, Hestia never turned anyone into a woodland creature or a morality lesson. She didn't need retribution. She had inner peace and a well-swept floor. Every meal, every prayer, every city festival began and ended with an offering to her. She was the goddess everyone quietly thanked for not being a handful. If the gods were a modern office, Zeus is the CEO with boundary issues. Athena's the overqualified strategist. Dionysus is HR's recurring complaint. And Hestia is that calm office manager, making sure the building doesn't burn down while the rest argue over who left the fridge open. Hestia reminds us that there's power in stillness, immense value in simplicity, and sometimes the most essential figure is the one holding everything together, silently. So the next time you light a candle, make toast, or simply crave a little peace in the chaos, remember Hestia, the quietly brilliant goddess behind the scenes. And as we leave behind the chaos and calm of the Olympian pantheon, take a deep breath, because we're about to meet someone who embodies duality like no other. Up next, Persephone, one of the most fascinating figures in Greek mythology, but her story is more than just darkness and light. It's about surviving isolation, beauty, and the price of being seen. Stay with me as we step into her world. Let's dim the lights and wander into the spectral garden of Persephone, a goddess with a weather forecast for a personality. In Greek mythology, she's the original dual citizen. Half the year she's the pastel bloom of spring, the other half she's the cool shadow at the heart of winter, life's resurrection and its soft decay, all wrapped up in one impossibly poised package. Picture a girl crowned with wild flowers, hands dusted in fertile earth, her laughter carrying on the wind, and then, with a turn, the same girl sits enthroned beside Hades, haloed not in petals but in the hush of the underworld. Persephone's story begins with her mother, Demeter, goddess of the harvest, whose very mood swings decided whether mortals feasted or starved. As Demeter's daughter Persephone was born into the lush realm of growing things, her path lined with green promise. But as is standard in the Greek myth starter pack, everything changes the moment a god gets a wild idea. Enter Hades, lord of the dead, master of the brooding stare, and owner of a chariot with questionable boundaries. He spotted Persephone gathering Narcissus and instantly decided, without so much as a text, she'd make the perfect queen. So he did what any self-respecting god of the underworld would do. He cracked open the earth, abducted her mid-flower picking, and vanished into the shadows. No warning, no awkward small talk, no chance to finish lunch. Demeter's reaction? Catastrophic. She tore across the world in a frenzy, desperate to find her lost daughter. When no one dared tell her where Persephone had gone, Demeter shut down the world's food supply out of sheer grief and rage. Crops withered, animals starved, and mortals began to riot. Global famine isn't just a side effect in Greek myth. It's a negotiation tactic. Eventually, Zeus, motivated not by fatherly devotion, but by the realization that starving mortals don't make sacrifices, stepped in to broker peace, the deal. Persephone could return home as long as she hadn't tasted the food of the underworld. But, because nothing is ever simple with Greek gods, Persephone had already eaten 6 ruby-bright pomegranate seeds, sealing her fate with the most high-stakes snack break in history. Thus, Persephone became a goddess of perpetual motion. Her year split between the sunlit fields of her mother and the dim halls of her husband. Spring and summer belonged to Demeter and her daughter's laughter. Autumn and winter are the domain of Persephone, queen of the dead. The ancient Greeks didn't just invent seasonal depression. They personified it, giving it a face and a crown. But here's where the myth gets a delicious twist. Over time, Persephone stopped being just a tragic figure, the weeping girl stolen from her youth. She grew into her shadowy throne, no longer just a pawn. She became a sovereign in her own right, serene, unyielding and quietly formidable. Mortals no longer pitied her. They prayed to her for mercy at the end of life, for gentle passage into the dark, for wisdom in the liminal spaces between beginnings and endings. She became the goddess of transformation, not just in the turning of the seasons, but in the soft revolution of the heart. Innocence surrendered, power discovered. Persephone walks through fields of violets and rivers of bones with the same measured grace. She is the reason for every blossom and every frostbitten stem. Now, while Persephone was learning to balance flower crowns and iron circlets, Psyche was facing a different kind of curse. From the moment she could toddle, people were whispering that she outshone the goddesses themselves. By the time she reached adulthood, Aphrodite's statues were gathering cobwebs, while strangers flocked in droves just to glance at Psyche's face. Her beauty wasn't just admired, it was worshipped, dissected, mythologized. She became less a person and more an event, a living shrine. The crowd saw her as a new Aphrodite, a mortal with the face of a goddess, and maybe a soul to match. But for Psyche, all that adoration was a shimmering wall of glass. She walked through her city like a rumor, always seen, never truly known. People watched her with the awe reserved for miracles. Untouchable, almost sacred, suitors wilted in her presence, convinced she was untouchable, a rival to the gods themselves. Even her own family felt the chill of her isolation. Her sisters married, started families, filled their homes with laughter and ordinary messes. Psyche, meanwhile, drifted through her days like a beautiful ghost, admired by all, embraced by none. No one dared to love her. No one even tried. Her beauty had become its own kind of exile, a curse disguised as a blessing. She spent evenings perched by her window, watching the world fade into dusk, wondering if this was her destiny, to be celebrated, but always alone. Maybe, she thought, the gods had marked her for admiration, rather than affection. A statue admired, but never touched. No oracle, no priest, no passing stranger ever offered a reason or a remedy. Psyche's loneliness was complete, a silence so deep it echoed, until, at last, something, or rather someone, answered. Not a mortal man, not a well-meaning priest, and definitely not the kind of fairy godmother you hope for. Instead, it was a goddess, and she wasn't arriving with gifts or gentle words. She came with a demand and a hint of vengeance. And that's where our tale pivots from isolation to intrigue. Because on Mount Olympus, beauty wasn't just a vanity project. It was a declaration of war. Let's see what happens when Aphrodite, the original influencer, sets her sights on Psyche. The next chapter begins. On Mount Olympus, beauty was more than vanity. Let's drift up just for a moment to Mount Olympus, where a bad hair day is a matter of national security, and beauty is a weapon of mass distraction. Here, the goddess Aphrodite, patron of lust, matchmaking, and the kind of envy that could power a small city, has a problem. The marble halls that used to echo with praise for her now sit suspiciously quiet. Her likeness, once dusted with rose petals and honey, stands forgotten under a relentless sun. The reason? Mortals have started skipping her temples entirely. They have a new obsession, a girl named Psyche, a mortal whose beauty is so luminous it's practically a health hazard. To Aphrodite, this is not just a social slight, it's a cosmic insult. It's the kind of betrayal that makes a goddess wonder if smiting is covered under her immortal insurance plan. She gazes down at Psyche, her lips curling into a smile colder than fresh marble. How dare this mortal attract worship meant for the divine? How dare a girl with no pedigree, no ambrosia breath, and absolutely zero wings become the new muse of love? Aphrodite's envy coils inside her, sharp as a serpent. She's ruined dynasties for less. She's toppled entire lineages because someone looked at her funny. Yet here is Psyche, being adored by mortals who should, by all cosmic rights, be on their knees before Aphrodite herself. So, with a gesture as elegant as it is lethal, she summons her son, the infamous Eros, god of love, breaker of hearts, and professional chaos agent. Now let's call Eros Eros for our sleepy postmodern purposes, because honestly, doesn't that sound like a cologne brand? He's no rookie at emotional sabotage. His arrows have toppled kings, started wars, and launched 1,000 regrettable love triangles. He's the reason your ex fell for that barista. He's the reason Helen sailed to Troy. He is, in short, not interested in low stakes. Aphrodite gives him the brief. Find Psyche. Make her fall for something truly monstrous. Not just unattractive. Something that would haunt her dreams. Something so far beneath her that mortals would laugh at her name for generations. Eros, ever the dutiful son, picks up his quiver with a sigh and descends to the mortal realm. It's nighttime, naturally, because all the best mythic shenanigans happen after dark. He slips into Psyche's chamber, where she sleeps, shadows flickering across her face as if the moon is painting her in silver. He's prepared to do what he's done 1,000 times, shoot the arrow, warp her fate, and watch the chaos bloom. But then, a classic mythic twist. As he draws the arrow, his gaze lingers on her. He's pierced emperors, queens, gods, but never has he seen a beauty so complete, so quietly dazzling. His hand trembles. The arrow pricks his skin. Just a pinprick, barely a scratch, but to a god, it's enough. Eros is struck, hard and irrevocable, by the very force he wields. The god of love has just become his own victim. Suddenly, the mission is impossible. He can't curse Psyche. He can't destroy her life. He wants, somehow, to save her from the fate his mother designed. So he flees, heart pounding, the wound on his finger burning like a secret. For the first time, Eros is not the puppet master. He's the puppet, strings pulled by longing. He will watch over Psyche, quietly, anonymously, his love hidden even from the gods. But secrecy is never simple on Olympus. Meanwhile, back in the mortal realm, Psyche's beauty has become a curse. Suitors, once endless, have vanished. Her admirers whisper that she's under a divine affliction. Her father, trembling with anxiety, seeks guidance from Apollo's oracle. The response is chilling. Psyche will never marry a mortal. Her husband will be a monster, feared even by the gods. She must be left atop a mountain, dressed as a bride, and abandoned to her fate. Psyche's family mourns. Her sisters wail, but Psyche is strangely calm. She has spent her life being adored, never touched by true affection. Perhaps this is the price of beauty, she thinks. Perhaps her only destiny is to be sacrificed for the peace of others, a scapegoat draped in silk. As the wind howls on the mountain peak, Psyche stands alone, her wedding dress fluttering like a flag of surrender. She expects fangs, claws, a monster's jaws. Instead, there's only silence. Then a gentle current lifts her from the rock. She floats, not falling, but flying, through clouds that shimmer with impossible light. When she opens her eyes, she finds herself in a meadow, where flowers glow in the twilight, each petal brighter than the last. A path of marble winds through the grass, leading to a palace so magnificent it seems to have grown from the dreams of a god. The columns ripple like water, the doors hum her name. Every detail is impossibly precise, yet utterly surreal. Invisible hands greet her, washing away the dust of fear. They dress her in robes that melt against her skin. Food appears warm, fragrant, untouched by mortal hands. Psyche, who was prepared for a monster, finds luxury instead. At night, a voice, soft, deep, and heartbreakingly gentle, speaks to her from the shadows. Do not be afraid. You are safe here. This is your home. He comes to her in darkness, her unseen husband, never revealing his face. Each night, he slips into her bed, his touch a promise, his laughter a balm. By day, she wanders golden halls. By night, she falls deeper under his spell. But with every whispered word, the mystery grows. He begs her, never try to see me. If you do, I must leave you forever, she asks. Why? He hesitates, sorrow in his voice, because love sometimes must live in the dark to survive. Psyche tries to content herself with the unknown. She tells herself that trust means not needing proof. But the heart is a restless animal. Doubt creeps in, especially when she thinks of her family, her sisters. She misses them, their laughter, their teasing, even their jealousy. One morning, the voice is changed, heavy with warning. Your sisters will come to visit you. They claim it's out of love, but what they bring is ruin. Please let them go. Do not let their words poison your heart. But Psyche, lonely and longing, pleads for them to visit. Her husband relents, but with one final warning: do not let their doubts become your own. Trust what we have. Trust me. The winds that once carried Psyche now bear her sisters to the palace gates. They arrive, their eyes wide with disbelief. Psyche is not only alive, she glows with a happiness they've never seen. She is dressed in silks that catch the sun, her hair a halo of starlight. The sisters embrace her, their smiles brittle, their envy barely hidden. The interrogation begins. Where is your husband? They ask, circling her like sharks in pearls. Psyche answers shyly, he comes only at night. I've never seen his face. Their faces freeze. You've never seen him. He keeps you in darkness. The worry is feigned, the poison real. What if he's a monster, Psyche? What if he's not who you think he is? Or worse, what if he's a god, using you as a plaything? The words slip in, slick as oil. He keeps you hidden, blind, dependent. Is that love? Or is it just another cage? Psyche tries to brush off their doubts, but the seed is planted. As her sisters leave, they whisper, just take a lamp one night. See him with your own eyes. If he truly loves you, what harm can the truth do? Their departure leaves Psyche restless. That night, as the palace hushes into darkness, she lies awake, her husband's arms wrapped around her, but her mind spinning far faster than his heartbeat. The doubts become a chorus, drowning out all sense of peace. What if he is a monster? What if she is nothing but a prize, a trinket in some divine game? Unable to suppress her curiosity, Psyche slips from bed, silent, trembling, her heart hammering in her chest. She cradles a small bronze oil lamp, its flame flickering like a guilty conscience. With each step, the air thickens. She draws near the sleeping form of her husband, the man who has loved her in darkness and secrecy. She holds the lamp above him. The light reveals not a monster, not a beast, but a man of impossible beauty. Golden curls spill across the pillow. His lips are soft, his lashes dark against his cheeks. And there, folded against his back, wings, vast and iridescent, a secret he carries even in sleep. This is Eros, the god of love, the very being sent to ruin her, now lying vulnerable beside her. Emotion floods her. Relief, awe, guilt. She leans closer, wanting to kiss him awake, to confess her love and her doubt. But fate is never kind to the curious. A single drop of hot oil slips from the lamp, splattering onto his shoulder. Eros wakes with a cry, half pain, half heartbreak. His eyes, wide and full of sorrow, find hers in the dim light. You broke your promise, he whispers, voice hollow with disappointment. You trusted fear more than love. I'm sorry, Psyche sobs, falling to her knees. I had to know. I just wanted to be certain. Eros withdraws, his glow fading. "Now you know," he says, and the words are a sentence. The palace shakes, the walls crumbling. Columns dissolve into fog. The invisible world he built collapses, leaving only ruin. Eros, heartbroken, vanishes into the shadows. Psyche is left alone, the lamp cold in her hand, her heart in splinters on the ground. She stands on a desolate hillside, staring at the ashes of a love undone by doubt. The silence presses in. She has seen love's true face, and in trying to claim it, she has lost everything. But myths, like dreams, refuse to end on the first heartbreak. As the dust settles and Psyche surveys the emptiness around her, the world itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for what she'll do next. And that, dear listeners, is the perfect place to let the night grow a little quieter, because the story of Psyche's trials and the endurance of love is only just beginning. Next we'll follow Psyche, barefoot and broken, across a world suddenly turned cold, as she learns what it truly means to love, to lose, and to survive the impossible. Psyche drifted through the world with the shell-shocked numbness of someone who's just lost everything. Her feet, once pampered in palatial corridors, were now raw and blistered, stung by stones and the chill of dawn dew. The opulent gardens she used to stroll through in her sleep, gone. The velvet voice that once whispered her name in the dark, gone. Even the air seemed thinner, less forgiving, as if the world itself was punishing her for loving a god. She called out for Eros across fields, forests, sleepy riverbanks, and even the liminal half-light of her own dreams. But the only reply was silence, heavy and absolute. When she finally returned to her father's palace, hoping for some scrap of solace, she found only cold marble and colder stairs. Whispers fluttered through the halls like moths. Her sisters, ever the cheerleaders of Schadenfreude, spun wild tales to anyone who'd listen. Psyche had fallen for a monster, married a demon, lost her mind, and come crawling home. The rumors spread faster than wildfire on a windy day, and no one believed the truth, that she'd loved and been loved by a god. So, Psyche left once more. Not as a fugitive, but as a woman with a purpose. This time, she was not running from horror, but toward hope. Whatever it took, however far she had to wander, she would find Eros again, even if it meant facing Olympus itself. But mortals, as we know, don't exactly get issued a visitor's pass to the realm of the gods. So Psyche went searching for the only being who might know the way, the very goddess who engineered her misery, Aphrodite. Yes, Psyche trembled as she approached the goddess. Aphrodite's reputation for beauty was only matched by her talent for vengeance. But if Eros still cared, if even a single ember remained in the ashes of their love, then Psyche was willing to risk everything, even the goddess's wrath. She found Aphrodite not on a golden throne, but in a secret garden, a mirror maze of emerald leaves and silver surfaces, where the goddess gazed endlessly at her own reflection, searching for flaws that dared not exist. Psyche stepped forward and knelt. Aphrodite didn't bother to turn. Her voice was cool, almost bored, as she surveyed her own divine perfection. "I warned you, mortal, and still you reached for what was mine." "I love him," Psyche whispered, her voice trembling but honest. Aphrodite finally deigned to meet Psyche's eyes, her own glinting with something sharp and dangerous. "You mean the son you doubted? The god you betrayed? Love?" The word curled from her lips like smoke. "You call this love?" Psyche bowed her head. "I was foolish, but I would do anything to earn back his trust." Aphrodite's laugh echoed through the garden, brittle as breaking crystal. "Anything?" she repeated, predatory delight flickering at the corners of her mouth. "Anything," Psyche said, steady now. If love demanded agony, she would endure it. Aphrodite's eyes narrowed, her smile growing colder. "Then you'll suffer. You'll be tested. And perhaps, if you survive, you'll be worthy of my son." And so began the gauntlet, the kind of divine hazing that makes mortals wish they'd just taken up basket weaving. This wasn't a test of muscle or magic. It was a test of devotion, a marathon of misery. With heartbreak as the finish line, Aphrodite wasted no time. Her beauty was the stuff of legend, but her cruelty, when triggered, was a force to be reckoned with. She led Psyche to a massive chamber that looked like a cereal aisle exploded. Mountains of seeds and grains tumbled together in a chaos of color and texture. Barley, wheat, millet, lentils, poppy seeds, beans, enough to make a nutritionist weep with joy. Aphrodite stretched out a perfectly manicured hand and yawned. By nightfall, separate every type, every last seed into its own pile. Fail, and you'll never see my son again. With that, she vanished, humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like the theme song for Mission Impossible. Psyche looked at the impossible task before her. Even an army of the world's most obsessive-compulsive neat freaks couldn't sort this mess by sundown. But love, as we know, is stubborn to the point of madness. She knelt, hands shaking, and began to pick out one seed at a time. The minutes crawled by, then slithered, then simply stopped making sense. Her vision swam, her back ached, and still she sorted, grain by grain, fighting the urge to collapse under the weight of futility. But here's where myth gets weird, and a little wonderful. The gods are always watching, and sometimes so are their allies. Unseen by Psyche, a legion of ants had been monitoring her struggle. Not your average picnic ants, but sacred ants, tiny servants of Demeter, the goddess of harvest. Maybe they pitied Psyche, maybe they had a soft spot for doomed romance. Whatever their motivation, the ants surged forward in a living, swirling river. Hundreds, then thousands, poured over the seeds, forming miniature assembly lines. In minutes, the chaos sorted itself into perfect, geometric piles. Barley, wheat, poppy, lentils, beans. Nature itself seemed to bend the rules for love. When Aphrodite returned at dusk, expecting to find a weeping heap of mortal failure, she was instead greeted with flawless order. She narrowed her eyes, nostrils flaring in annoyance. "You had help," she spat, scanning the room for evidence of magic or cheating. Psyche bowed her head. "I did what I could." Aphrodite's lips twitched, the ghost of a smirk flickering across her face. She hadn't expected the mortal to finish, let alone with such quiet dignity. But there were more trials yet, and Aphrodite's cruelty was just getting warmed up. This was only the beginning, the goddess warned. If you really want to see Eros again, you'll need more than luck. Psyche, exhausted and aching, simply nodded. She didn't have pride left, just resolve. Because love, she realized, was worth more than pride, more than comfort, more than fear. She would keep fighting, no matter how many divine curveballs came her way. Before she could rest, Aphrodite handed her the next impossible task. This one laced with danger and a dash of irony. "See that river down there?" the goddess asked, gesturing to a silver ribbon twisting through a wildflower meadow. "It runs beside a field where golden-fleeced rams graze. Their wool is worth more than gold itself. Bring me a tuft of it, just a handful. Do try not to get yourself gored." With that, the goddess vanished, leaving Psyche to face what sounded suspiciously like a death wish, masquerading as a favor. These rams weren't the cuddly, cartoonish sheep you count when you can't sleep. Golden-eyed, horns sharp as daggers, they were sacred beasts with tempers to match. They glittered in the sun, but their rage was legendary. Trespassers had a way of ending up as stains in the grass. Still, Psyche climbed down the hill, her heart pounding so hard she half expected the rams to hear it. She crouched behind a screen of reeds, watching the herd stampede and snort, their hooves breaking rocks and their eyes gleaming with suspicion. There was no way she could survive a daylight approach. Her courage faltered, and she nearly collapsed, tears of frustration stinging her cheeks. But once again, the world watched, and this time it spoke back. A gentle voice rustled through the grass, soft as wind in reeds. It was a spirit of the river, ancient and wise, bound to the water's edge. "Do not enter the field while the sun is high," the spirit murmured, its voice almost a lullaby. "The rams are furious by day, but when twilight falls, they rest in the cool shadows. Wait until dusk and gather the wool from thorns where it has snagged. No beast will miss it." Hope flickered anew. Psyche waited, patient as stone, while the golden rams roamed and raged. As the sun dipped below the horizon, one by one the beasts wandered into the shade, curling up like oversized cats in the growing darkness. Psyche crept forward, her steps feather light, and found tufts of golden fleece tangled in brambles and tree bark. Abandoned, unguarded, shimmering like stardust, she gathered what she needed and hurried back to Aphrodite. The goddess eyed the golden wool in Psyche's outstretched hand, her expression unreadable. Alive again, she muttered, unable to hide her surprise. Psyche didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. She simply stood, silent and steady, a living rebuke to every expectation of mortal weakness. Aphrodite's irritation deepened. She designed these trials to break Psyche, to prove that love was just another word for disappointment. But Psyche's resolve was proving contagious. Even the gods were starting to take notice. So for the third ordeal, Aphrodite set the bar even higher, with a challenge that should have ended the story right there. "Fetch me water," she commanded, her tone icy. Not from a well or spring, but from the river Styx itself. Psyche's blood ran cold. The Styx was no ordinary river. It marked the boundary between life and death, its waters deadly to mortals and terrifying even to gods. Its banks swirled with curses and the shrieks of lost souls. No living being crossed its threshold and returned. The task was a death sentence, wrapped up with a pretty bow. Still, Psyche did not falter. She journeyed to the edge of a cliff, so sheer it looked carved by the hand of chaos. Far below, the Styx snaked through the underworld, dark and shining, its surface alive with vaporous tendrils and the soft wailing of the dead. Winged monsters, furies older than time, circled the banks, their claws sharp, their eyes brighter than vengeance. There was no path down, no hope, only the jagged edge of despair. Psyche collapsed beneath a rocky outcropping, clutching the tiny crystal vial Aphrodite had pressed into her hand with mock encouragement. "Just a sip," the goddess had said, "enough to show you tried." Then, as the world seemed to tighten around her, a shimmer split the air. A high, piercing cry echoed down the canyon. From a crack in the stone, an eagle emerged, massive, regal, its feathers shining with the light of storms. This was no ordinary eagle, but the one who served Zeus himself, king of gods and sponsor of lost causes. The eagle landed before Psyche, took the vial in its talons, and soared straight down, undaunted by monsters or curses. The Furies shrieked, but even death gave way to Zeus's command. In moments the eagle returned, the vial now brimming with the cursed waters of the Styx. Psyche stared in awe and gratitude, not daring to question why Zeus had intervened. Maybe Eros had once helped the king of gods. Maybe even divine tempers can be softened by the stubbornness of love. She returned to Aphrodite, who accepted the vial with sullen silence. No praise, no gloating, just a cold, calculating stare. Psyche had passed again, and everyone sensed it. The final challenge would push her beyond the bounds of mortal endurance. And as Psyche steeled herself for what came next, the stakes rose higher. The next trial would take her where even the gods feared to tread. In love, as in myth, the journey to redemption often passes through darkness deeper than shadow, and not every story finds the light again. But Psyche, battered but undefeated, was ready to risk it all for one last chance. And so, as Aphrodite's voice prepared to deliver its coldest command yet, our story turns. The underworld awaits. The next trial will test not just perseverance, but the very soul of love itself. Aphrodite's voice was colder than the Styx itself, and Psyche's journey into the shadows was about to begin. Let's set the scene. Aphrodite, queen of pettiness and high expectations, leans in with a smile that could cut diamonds. Her words land colder than a graveyard at midnight. "Your last task, darling," she coos, "is to travel to Hades' kingdom. You'll have to ask Queen Persephone for a box of her beauty. Bring it back to me. I'm exhausted from your existence alone. You know, just a casual errand, collecting beauty from the literal land of the dead. The kind of favor only a goddess would ask, and only a doomed mortal would accept. A death sentence, gift wrapped in velvet sarcasm." Because in Greek myth, if someone asks you to go to the underworld, what they really mean is, I hope you never come back. But here's the thing, Psyche is done hesitating. She's walked through fire, faced impossible tasks, and the gods have already thrown everything at her, except a kitchen sink. And let's face it, they're probably saving that for the sequel. If the only way back to Eros is through the Shadowlands, then she'll stroll through them in bare feet. Some say she's guided by Demeter's whispers. Others claim it's the invisible kindness of lost souls. But either way, Psyche finds a secret entrance, a cave yawning in the hillside, as if the earth itself is sighing in old pain. It's a scar on the world, hidden but impossible to heal. She doesn't come empty-handed. 2 coins glint in her pocket, payment for Charon, ferryman of the dead, and tucked under her arm, 3 barley cakes, treats for Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guards the gates more fiercely than a bouncer at the world's worst nightclub. Each step down steals the warmth from her bones. The air thickens, not with mist, but with the hush of 1,000 unsaid apologies. Souls drift by like half-remembered dreams, thin, aimless, aching. They don't speak. They barely notice her. In Hades, everyone is just a memory fumbling for a door that won't open. At the shore of the river Acheron, Charon awaits, gaunt and silent. Psyche offers up her coins with trembling fingers. He takes them without so much as a thank you. Classic underworld customer service, and rows her across waters blackened by centuries of grief. The silence is so deep it feels alive, swallowing every heartbeat. When they reach the other side, Cerberus is already there. 3 sets of jaws snapping, eyes glowing with the hunger of old nightmares. But Psyche, now a veteran in the art of surviving divine nonsense, tosses him the barley cakes. He devours them, lets her pass with a low growl, and for a moment she wonders if even monsters crave kindness. Inside Persephone's palace, everything gleams with the kind of cold beauty that makes you shiver. The queen herself sits atop an obsidian throne, her eyes twin garnets polished to a merciless shine. You'd expect her to be terrifying, but Persephone's power is quieter, a patience learned from centuries of waiting, loving, losing, and ruling the dead. She studies Psyche. You've come for beauty, Persephone says, her voice as soft as the dark earth in spring. But do you know what it costs? Psyche's answer is simple, honest and without self-pity. I don't want it for myself. I'm bringing it to Aphrodite. For once, the queen of the underworld almost smiles. Maybe she recognizes the madness of love, the way it asks for everything, then demands a little more. With a steady hand, Persephone lifts a small box. Plain, unmarked, impossibly heavy. Do not open this, she warns, her words edged with prophecy. It's not yours to see. Psyche bows, thanks her, and turns to leave. The journey back should feel lighter, but now she's carrying temptation itself. The box pulses in her grip, whispering promises. What if Aphrodite's beauty could make Psyche worthy of Eros? What if this is the final test, the last cruel proof she needs to become enough? The closer she gets to sunlight, the louder those doubts grow. Her heart pounds, her fingers itch. She knows she shouldn't, but longing has always been her undoing. As the first rays of daylight touch her face, Psyche cracks open the box. There is no flash of radiance, no golden glow. Instead, a cold mist pours out, thicker than shadow, heavier than sorrow. It wraps around her like the arms of sleep itself. This isn't beauty, it's oblivion, the enchanted slumber Persephone keeps for the souls who wander too far. No scream escapes her lips, no final words. She simply falls, her body folding softly onto the grass at the threshold between worlds. The box rests at her side, sealed again, as if nothing ever happened. Psyche isn't dead, she isn't alive. She is caught in a pause so deep, time itself forgets to move. And that should have been the end. Another mortal, undone by curiosity. Another cautionary tale for the ages. But here's where Greek myth cheats, because love, as it turns out, is the one thing that even the gods can't predict. Far above, in the gold and marble sprawl of Olympus, Eros, wounded, exiled, heartsick, watches everything. His body has healed, but his heart, Not so much. He's kept away from mortals, from Psyche, from everything that reminds him of what he's lost, because his mother demanded it. But when word reaches him that Psyche has entered Hades for his sake, something inside him snaps. He realizes, if she can cross death for him, then surely he can cross his mother. With a burst of wings and light, Eros tears through the clouds, leaving a trail of fractured starlight behind him. He finds Psyche lying motionless at the edge of the mortal realm, as pale and still as a statue abandoned by its sculptor. He falls to his knees, his tears a mix of fury and grief, because what is love if not a refusal to let go? He seals the box shut, as if to lock away the curse itself, then presses his lips to hers. It's not a magic spell. It's not a fairy tale fix. It's a kiss forged from memory, a plea whispered into the dark, a promise that love will not surrender. While there's breath left to fight, Psyche inhales, ragged and desperate. The death sleep lifts, retreating back into the box like a secret that's tired of being kept. Her hands reach for Eros before she can speak. "You came back," she gasps. "I never stopped loving you," he answers, his voice breaking with relief. For a heartbeat, nothing else matters. Not Olympus, not gods, not fate. Just two souls, battered and stubborn, finding each other again in the ruins of everything they were supposed to fear. Of course, nothing shakes up divine politics like a mortal who refuses to die. The gods gather in Olympus, each cradling their own opinions and grudges. Aphrodite storms in, her rage hotter than the sun. "This mortal has mocked us," she thunders. "She's defied sacred law, corrupted my son, and made a mockery of my power. She must be erased." But the other gods hesitate. They've watched Psyche suffer, endure, and return, again and again. Some are amused, some are jealous, but none can deny that she's crossed lines even immortals fear to approach. Her love has outlasted death, and that kind of devotion is rarer than a sober satyr at a Dionysian festival. So naturally, the gods punt the decision upstairs. Zeus, king of thunderbolts and inconvenient wisdom, sits on his throne, lightning flickering in one hand, fate tangled in the other. He's seen it all, Psyche's fall, her rise, her doubts, her defiance. He waits until the bickering quiets, then speaks in a voice that rolls over Olympus like a summer storm. "Enduring love is its own kind of power," he intones. Aphrodite opens her mouth, but Zeus waves her off. "You've tested her. She's passed every trial. More than any mortal before her. She is not unworthy. She is proof that mortals can love as fiercely as gods." He turns to Eros and Psyche, who stand together, battered but unbroken. "If you wish to be together for eternity, so be it." With a flick of his wrist, Zeus conjures a goblet filled with ambrosia, the nectar of immortality. He offers it to Psyche. "Drink, and you will cease to be mortal. Your heart will echo with eternity. But know this, your trials will not be forgotten. You'll carry them, as we all carry the stories that shape us." Psyche takes the cup. Her hands are steady. She drinks, and warmth floods her body. Not burning, but blossoming, like the slow unfurling of a flower in moonlight. Her senses sharpen. Her pulse deepens, resonating like a bell that tolls through centuries. And just like that, she becomes something new. She is no longer Psyche the mortal. No longer a girl defined by what she lacks. She is Psyche the divine. Eros clasps her hand, and in front of all Olympus, they are named husband and wife. The gods, who once saw Psyche as a footnote in a scandal, now gaze at her with awe. Even Aphrodite, who once cursed her, can no longer deny what stands before her. A woman who has faced death, temptation, betrayal, and still chosen love, not pride. The goddess of love is silent, which in Olympus is as good as an apology. Zeus declares Psyche the goddess of the soul, her very name meaning both soul and breath. Her journey hasn't polished her into a perfect statue. Instead, it's made her the living embodiment of what love endures and survives. Olympus throws a party that makes the Trojan War look like a tea party. Nectar pours like rivers. Stars spiral in celebration. Even the fates, those grumpy weavers of doom, allow themselves a sly smile at the story they once tried to tangle. Psyche stands by Eros, no longer uncertain, no longer less than. She is equal. She is divine. They gaze out over the mortal world, guardians of love and the journey of the soul. From their union is born a daughter, Hedon, goddess of pleasure and delight, the living proof that joy springs from the union of love and soul. Once Psyche walked among thorns and shadows. Now she dances in eternal light. Not because she was flawless, but because she kept walking. She loved, she lost, she suffered, and she rose again. She is proof that even mortals, even the broken-hearted, can reach the heavens, one impossible task at a time. So the tale of Eros and Psyche doesn't end in tragedy, like so many mortal loves. It ends in transformation, not into myth, but into something far more powerful. A truth that echoes from marble temples to midnight bedrooms. Love, real love, is never easy. It is tested, doubted, wounded. But when it endures, it becomes eternal. Psyche's story began with a curse she never asked for. She was worshipped by strangers, envied by her sisters, manipulated by gods. She was punished for being loved, then punished again for loving back. And still, she tried. Even when her heart cracked, even when faith shattered, she kept going. And Eros, god of love, learned too. That love is not a weapon, not a game, not a secret to be hidden. It's a light, but only if you're brave enough to face it. Together they teach Olympus the lesson it forgot. Love isn't the property of the gods. It belongs to anyone willing to fight for it. Across Greece, lovers begin to offer prayers, not just to Aphrodite, but to Psyche. Her name is whispered at weddings, births, funerals, because she isn't just a goddess. She's a reminder that the soul can survive despair. That love, when it falls, can rise, and that no matter how deep the underworld or how sharp the trial, the heart knows the way home. Centuries later, after temples crumble and empires fall, Psyche's story lingers. In the word psyche, meaning soul. In psychology, the study of the soul. And in every story where love is tested and endures, Eros and Psyche live on. Not as statues, but as echoes inside each of us. Every time we choose trust over fear, forgiveness over pride, or love over silence, we walk their path, and maybe, just maybe, we become a little more divine too. And now, as our tale of love's transformation closes beneath the bright immortality of Olympus, we slip from the realm of soul to the shadows of legend. Because before there were monsters, before the world feared a woman's gaze, there was another story of beauty, betrayal, and exile. Long before she was feared, before statues froze mid-scream and serpents whispered across marble floors, Medusa was a mortal girl, beautiful beyond compare. Let's roll back the fog of myth and memory to a time before Medusa's name was a punchline or a threat, whispered to scare children into brushing their teeth. Before marble mouths hung open in eternal mid-scream, before coiling serpents flickered across cold stone, Medusa was a mortal girl, a fact the stories rarely dwell on. Her beauty wasn't the blaring trumpet-blasted kind you see in royal portraits. It existed quietly, the way sunlight sometimes slips through a crack in the fortress of an old, cold world, unexpected and utterly uninvited. Her hair shimmered, so dark it threatened to swallow the night, each strand glimmering like polished onyx. Her eyes, deep and fathomless, carried the hush of oceans on the brink of a storm. She moved with a gentle grace that unsettled kings and immortals alike, a stillness that made people nervous, as if she saw too much and spoke too little. Born to the Gorgon sisters, Steno and Euryale, forces of nature in their own right, Medusa alone was mortal, a single fragile thread in a tapestry of monsters and miracles. Her sisters, untouchable and ever-living, wore their monstrosity like a crown. But Medusa was made for endings. That made her precious, at least to those who cared to notice. But Medusa wanted no pedestal, no suitors, no fast track to immortality. She craved only one thing: devotion. Not the kind that demanded adoration or applause, but the quiet, persistent faith that lights the incense before dawn, that sweeps empty marble floors, that bows its head in humility because it believes, not because it must. So she took the vows. involuntarily. She bound herself to Athena, that cool and contradictory goddess perched between war and wisdom. Untouchable, unseduced, unimpressed by the usual games of gods and mortals, the temple where Medusa served clung to the cliffs like a secret, high above the churning sea. Its marble gleamed in the moonlight, and in the hush before sunrise, you could find Medusa tending to the shadows. She swept, she tended the flames, she whispered prayers that rose and vanished, little offerings hurled against the indifference of eternity. She kept this discipline for herself, not for the eyes of others. Yet, inevitably, eyes found her anyway. Worshippers crept sideways glances at her as they muttered their prayers. Some would leave offerings not just to Athena, but to the mortal girl they had begun to treat as a living icon. Medusa's beauty became rumor, then legend. Her face, veiled in humility, became a symbol of what could never be possessed. Her voice, rarely heard, was like the hush after a storm, something you miss only when it's gone. She lived for the goddess, not for the crowd, but the crowd insisted on mythologizing her anyway. But beauty, even tucked away in a temple, is never truly safe. The story of Medusa's grace slithered through marble corridors, seeping out past city walls, past fields and forests, up the slopes of Olympus, until even the gods grew curious. For in Olympus, the line between admiration and possession is, let's say, a little blurry. Enter Poseidon, god of the sea, architect of storms, and, let's face it, not exactly a model of self-restraint. This is not the tale of a gentle god, but of a force who breaks and takes as he pleases. Poseidon heard of Medusa, but what fascinated him wasn't just her mortal beauty, it was her discipline, her refusal, her self-possession. She belonged to no man, no king, no god, not even really to herself anymore. Her loyalty was to Athena, and as anyone who's ever been stalked by an obsessive ex knows, refusal just adds fuel to the fire. The more Medusa prayed, the more Poseidon prowled. He watched, waiting for the moment when walls and rituals would fail to protect her. And one evening, when the tide was high and the temple emptied of worshippers, Poseidon rose from the sea. He did not call out. Gods don't knock. He strode straight into Athena's sacred domain, trailed by seawater and the scent of brine. Medusa, alone at her prayers, turned to find that shadow filling the doorway, trident left behind, but appetite very much intact. She called for Athena, her goddess, her protector, her ideal. But the temple echoed back nothing but her own fear. She ran, but temples are built to contain, not to let you escape. Beneath the blank stone gaze of Athena's statue, Poseidon violated what was supposed to be untouchable. It was not a seduction. It was a violation, raw and unanswerable. When it was done, he vanished, leaving only salt and silence as proof that gods rarely face consequences. Medusa, shaken to the core, curled up beneath her goddess's feet, waiting for justice, for comfort, for anything that might resemble mercy. But in Olympus, justice is a rare bird, and mercy is usually reserved for the powerful. When Athena returned, she found the temple changed, the air heavy with shame, and the echo of what could not be spoken. The incense had burned out. The marble floor was stained with sea's memory. At its heart, Medusa knelt, head bowed, still holding on to hope for a shred of understanding. But Athena's eyes were not soft. They burned, cold and pitiless. The goddess saw only that her sanctuary had been defiled. Whether she blamed Medusa out of pride, denial, or the inflexible laws of divinity, it didn't matter. The mortal would be made to pay. Athena's judgment had to be visible, unforgettable, eternal. She stepped down from her pedestal, not the marble one, the mythic one, and stood over Medusa, who trembled, still expecting the mercy that mortals sometimes dream gods will provide. Instead, Athena's voice rang between the pillars, thunder in marble skin. "You have brought shame into my house. Let the world see what becomes of beauty that invites destruction." With that, Athena reached out a single hand and touched Medusa's brow. The transformation was instantaneous, a kind of magic that rewrites not just flesh, but fate. Luminous hair, once dark and soft, unraveled into a writhing nest of serpents. They hissed, an echo of all the prayers she'd ever whispered, twisted now into something cruel. Her skin lost its warmth. Her bones felt the cold of isolation. Her eyes, once gentle, now seethed with a power so intense that one glance could turn living creatures to stone. Not just invaders, not just enemies, anyone. This was not a curse of protection. It was a curse of loneliness, of perpetual exile. Medusa screamed, but the sound was stripped of its humanity. Her tears, once salt, dried up before they could fall. Even her breath seemed to freeze. Mirrors shattered at her reflection. Worst of all, her gaze, once a balm, now a weapon, could never again rest on another soul without destroying it. Athena did not flinch. She did not look away. She simply watched as her most faithful priestess became the very monster the world would come to fear. The temple doors closed behind Medusa as she fled, her cries ricocheting through empty halls, echoing down the cliffs. There was no home left to her, no sanctuary, no arms to hold her, only a world that turned to stone in her wake. Athena returned to her throne, unmoved. In the tally of Olympus, punishments are not required to be just minus, only lasting. And Medusa's new face would last longer than any mortal memory. Banished from temple and city, Medusa wandered into the wilds. Her only companions, the serpents that crowned her. Her footsteps left a trail of silent sculptures. Birds caught mid-flight, deer frozen mid-leap, insects turned to tiny gems of marble. Even the smallest creatures paid for a glance. She wandered far past the reach of men and gods, to a bleak, windswept island at the world's ragged edge. There, she found a cave already half filled with statues, petrified warriors, beasts, maybe even unlucky wanderers who'd stumbled upon her by chance. It was a museum of her own accidental making, and she the reluctant curator. Here began her second life, not as a priestess, not as a mortal, but as a pariah. Medusa no longer wept. Her tears belonged to that earlier version of herself, the girl who believed prayers could save her, who thought loyalty was a shield. That Medusa died on the cold marble floor of Athena's temple. What remained was something new, not the monster of legend, but a woman carved from betrayal. The serpents in her hair became her only confidants, whispering warnings in the darkness, coiling tighter when strangers approached. They spoke not in words but in instinct and dread, their hissing a lullaby of survival. Medusa took up carving the cave walls, scratching images into stone, as if by doing so she could hold on to the fragments of her old life. She etched faces, her sisters, her goddess, the temple lost to her. The cave became a gallery of memory, a desperate attempt to preserve what the world was so eager to erase. Every so often, a new hero would arrive, lured by stories of a monstrous maiden or the promise of glory. They came with swords and shining shields, convinced that slaying her would make them legends. They underestimated her, not just her deadly gaze, but the depth of her pain. None of them returned. With each defeat, Medusa felt herself slipping further from who she had been. She was not dead, but her humanity was fading, replaced by the legend everyone else insisted on telling. She was becoming the monster the world demanded. The gods, of course, had already lost interest. Her suffering was old news. Back in the cities, her story mutated. No one spoke her name in sorrow anymore. It became a warning, passed from tongue to tongue. All the jagged edges of truth sanded down until only the monstrous outline remained. Medusa, the Gorgon. Medusa, the seductress. Medusa, the woman whose eyes turned men to stone. The details of what had happened in Athena's temple were erased, replaced by a narrative where the gods were blameless, and Medusa's curse was somehow her own doing. Priests and poets preferred their gods spotless, and their monsters clearly labelled. Children were warned that Medusa would come for them if they misbehaved. Soldiers carved her face onto shields, not to honor her but to mock. Her visage became a symbol of fear, a weapon turned against her by the very powers that had cast her out. Medusa, alone in her exile, could feel the weight of these words, the stories that twisted her life into a cautionary fable. She had never asked to be feared. She had only survived, and in a world built on power, survival itself could be the greatest threat. Yet beneath the roar of hero tales and the chants of frightened children, a quieter story persisted. In distant mountain villages, old women left offerings at cave mouths, whispering that Medusa guarded women who had been wronged. To them, she was not a monster, but a protector, a guardian of the wounded. These were the soft voices, the ones nearly drowned by the tidal wave of myth. But they lingered, stubborn as wildflowers in cracks of stone. For Medusa, the world had split. To most, she was a monster. To a hidden few, a martyr. She could not know how her legend was being shaped. She only knew that no matter how far she fled, the world would keep sending men with swords, convinced that killing her would win them glory. They did not care who she was, only what she had become. And somewhere out there, another challenger was already growing up, a boy fated to become a hero, destined to be her final visitor. While Medusa lived in exile, her legend spreading like wildfire, the world outside her cave was already preparing for the arrival of a new kind of hero, a man whose name would forever be linked to hers. But that, dear insomniacs, is another chapter. And trust me, it's one you won't want to miss. Tonight, as the moon hangs heavy, and the air is thick with the kind of silence that only knows how to wait for tragedy, we find ourselves caught between two stories. One of a boy with a prophecy stitched into his shadow, and one of a woman whose name will echo down every corridor of fear. That's right, insomniacs. We're drifting into Perseus' quest and the tragedy of Medusa, where heroism smells suspiciously like guilt, and monsters have softer hearts than the gods who made them. Let's begin, not with the clang of swords or the glint of divine armor, but with two kinds of exile. Far across the churning sea, Medusa lives in a hush so deep it's nearly holy. Her legend, meanwhile, slithers through the world, whispered at firesides, painted on vases, invoked to frighten children into obedience. Medusa herself, though, exists in a quieter banishment, a living myth, breathing, dreaming, longing for something as simple as a night without fear. Meanwhile, in another pocket of silence, a boy named Perseus is born to a different kind of loneliness. His mother, Danae, is locked away in a bronze tower, her only companions the cold walls and the muffled heartbeat of a prophecy she never asked for. King Acrisius, her father, is the architect of this prison. He's not a fan of ambiguity or risk, especially when an oracle has declared that his own grandson will bring about his end. So he does what any self-respecting ancient king would do. He locks his daughter up and throws away the key, hoping fate will take the hint. But fate in Greek myth is about as cooperative as a cat on bath day. The gods, ever ready to meddle, see an opportunity. Zeus, never one to respect a locked door or consent, appears to Danae in the form of golden rain, slipping past barriers both physical and moral. From this shimmering, questionable encounter, Perseus is conceived. He is born not from love, but from divine intrusion and mortal despair. Acrisius, finding the child, is paralyzed by dread. He cannot bring himself to kill a son of Zeus outright. He's not that stupid, so he opts for a subtler, more cowardly execution. Danae and her newborn are sealed inside a wooden chest and cast into the indifferent sea. The waves, ruled by Poseidon, do not devour them. Instead, the current delivers mother and son to the rocky shores of Seriphos, a tiny island barely more than a speck on the god's map. Here, a fisherman named Dictys discovers them, and with the kind of decency rarely seen in these tales, offers them shelter. Dana, hardened by her ordeal, raises Perseus in a life of careful anonymity. She teaches him not just how to survive, but how to keep secrets. Zeus's name is a ghost that never crosses her lips. Perseus grows under the watchful eye of his mother and the gentle guidance of Dictys, a childhood marked by humility, strength, and the ever-present hum of things left unsaid. But, as always, peace is a short-term rental in the world of Greek myth. Enter King Polydectes, ruler of Seriphos, a man with a taste for power and an eye for Danae. He's politely monstrous. Instead of snatching what he wants outright, he schemes. Perseus, now a young man with sharp eyes and sharper pride, stands in his way. Polydectes invites Perseus to a grand feast, a social trap disguised as hospitality. Each guest must bring a gift. Perseus, poor and principled, arrives empty-handed. Polydectes, never missing a chance to humiliate, seizes the moment. "If you can't bring a gift," he sneers, "then fetch me the head of Medusa." The room erupts in laughter, because nothing says fun like sending a teenager to his death. Stung by pride and ignorant of the real story behind the monster, Perseus agrees. This is where the gods lean in. Their interest piqued by the drama, Athena, perhaps still haunted by her own role in Medusa's fate, senses an opportunity for cosmic bookkeeping. She and Hermes visit Perseus in his dreams, their voices curling like smoke around his thoughts. They do not offer comfort. Instead, they provide tools, winged sandals to carry him above the earth, a shield polished to a mirror's shine, an unbreakable sword, and the helm of Hades itself, capable of cloaking him in invisibility. Each gift is a ticket to survival, but also a thread, tightening the noose of fate. Let's pause here. The gods are not in the habit of charity. Their gifts are investments, each with a hidden cost. They have not chosen Perseus to right a wrong or deliver justice. They have chosen him to finish a story that began long before he was born. A story that began with a girl, alone in a temple, praying to gods who listened only to themselves. Perseus sets out, divine tools strapped to his side, the weight of a king's dare coiled in his chest. But finding Medusa is not as simple as following a map. Her exile is so complete that even the gods have lost sight of her. To locate her lair, Perseus must consult the Grey Eye, three ancient sisters who share a single eye and a single tooth, an economy of body parts that makes you question the gods' sense of humor. The Grey Eye are older than Olympus, swaddled in shadow and old grudges. They dwell in a realm where darkness pools between dreams and daylight. Perseus, never the supplicant, waits until the sisters, squabbling over their lone eye, are distracted. He snatches the eye from their gnarled hands. "Tell me where she is," he commands, holding their only vision hostage, "or remain blind forever." They hiss, the sound brittle with ancient spite, but finally they answer. They speak of an island lost beyond mortal maps, where the sea is always storm-lashed, and the rocks are littered with the petrified remains of the overconfident. On this island, no bird dares sing, no star dares linger. Only statues stand sentinel, each a frozen plea for mercy. Here, they say, is the lair of Medusa. So Perseus flies, literally winged sandals slicing through cloud and wind, heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. He sees himself returning home, holding a monster's head aloft, glory burning in his chest. He does not know the truth of Medusa's story. He does not know what kind of curse he's about to inherit. The gods have equipped him to kill, but not to understand. They have prepared him to be a hero, not a witness. Let's slow things down, just for a moment. As Perseus glides over the roiling sea, the wind moans around him, as if trying to speak a warning. But Perseus, like all heroes with a quota to fill, hears only silence, the kind of silence the gods themselves know well. The silence that follows after you've created a monster and called it justice, hoping no one will ever ask why. He lands on the island's jagged shore, greeted by a landscape of horror. The statues are everywhere. Men frozen mid-scream, armor fused to flesh, faces contorted in the instant before oblivion. It is a cemetery of ambition, a monument to failed heroics. Perseus steps carefully, his mirrored shield gripped tight, each footfall echoing off stone and sorrow. Athena's advice rings in his memory. Never look at her directly. Use the shield as a mirror. Be swift. Be silent. But she has neglected to mention why the statues look not only terrified but surprised, as if in their final moment they realized they'd been wrong about the monster. The cave is a cathedral of shadows, air thick with the musk of snakes and the damp rot of forgotten dreams. Perseus moves deeper, wings folded behind him. The only sound is the soft, restless hiss of serpents, a chorus of warning and exhaustion. And then, there, Medusa. Not the roaring beast of legend, not the nightmare painted onto pottery. Instead, she is curled on a slab of stone, arms wrapped around herself in restless sleep. In the reflection of his shield, Perseus sees her face, not monstrous, but strangely serene, almost beautiful. Her features, half veiled by a tangle of sleeping snakes, hold the fragile peace of someone who has wept herself empty. He hesitates. This is not the demon he expected. This is a woman, cursed and abandoned, caught in the crossfire of gods and mortals alike. She does not snarl or lunge. She dreams, unaware of her own infamy. Perseus' resolve quivers, but the memory of his mother's captivity, of Polydectes' sneer, of the promised glory, the script of heroism, forces his hand. He raises the sword. The mirrored shield trembles. A single snake wakes, tongue flickering. Medusa stirs, her eyes fluttering, still closed. She does not scream. She does not fight. She is simply, heartbreakingly human. In that breathless pause between hope and horror, Perseus brings the sword down. The blade arcs in a flash of borrowed godlight. Silence crashes in, heavy as grief. Medusa's head falls into a satchel lined with bronze scales, her myth now contained but not extinguished. The island exhales, as if relieved. But the relief is hollow, because the tragedy does not end with the severing of a head. You can decapitate a body, but a story, especially a story born of violence and misunderstanding, cannot be so easily killed. Perseus does not linger. He slips Medusa's head into the enchanted satchel, careful not to meet the gaze that even death cannot soften. The snakes, severed from their host, writhe and hiss, their anger undimmed. Her eyes remain open, unblinking, still able to turn the world to stone. Perseus does not look. He cannot. The gods have handed him a weapon, but it feels more like a curse, a trophy that pulses with accusation. As he soars away from the island, the sky feels heavier, the silence colder. The ocean below stirs uneasily, for this act, lauded in mortal tales as heroic, has awakened old debts. Poseidon feels the rupture, a violation of his realm and revenge for an ancient slight. Athena, in her high halls, counts the cost of her own handiwork. The fates, those weavers of inevitability, add another thread to their tapestry. Still, Perseus presses onward, mind racing with the promise of vindication. He will return triumphant. He will free his mother. He will silence a king with the proof of his impossible victory. Yet the satchel grows heavier, each beat of the winged sandals a reminder of what he's done. He remembers the mirrored shield, the peaceful face, the absence of malice in the moment of death. Was this truly a monster? Or had he, armed with divine blessing and mortal ignorance, killed someone whose only crime was to survive what the gods had done to her? The question gnaws at him, but he buries it beneath the armor of duty. The gods guided him, didn't they? That's what heroes are supposed to believe. But as the wind howls louder, Perseus senses something is not right. The satchel hums, a vibration more felt than heard. It's as if Medusa's soul, still tangled in the curse, still wounded and watchful, lingers, still aware, still waiting. The snakes rattle, restless in his dreams. Perseus will go on to slay other monsters, rescue imperiled maidens, and write his name into the constellations, but he will never again know true rest. Because sometimes, in the coldest hours of the night, he swears he hears the faint sibilance of snakes beneath his bedroll. A warning, a lament, or perhaps just a memory of a girl once left alone in a temple, begging the gods for mercy that never came. And so, as Perseus flies homeward with a legend clutched in his arms, and the weight of a story he cannot escape, we prepare to follow him into the next chapter, where Medusa's legacy and the evolution of her myth will ripple out far beyond the moment of her death. Because the story is not finished, it is only changing shape. Next we meet Perseus as he returns to Seriphos, windswept and haunted, the head of a legend tucked under his cloak. Perseus strode back into the city of Seriphos, wind tangling his hair, bronze armor glinting in the dying light, and the head of a legend concealed beneath his cloak. The crowds thronged the gates, faces alight with hope and ignorance, utterly unaware of the cost hidden in the satchel swinging at his side. They cheered for his return, deaf to the silence he carried. King Polydectes, perched on his throne, wore his usual mask of smug disbelief. He never truly believed Perseus would survive. His challenge had been a death warrant disguised as a jest, a royal dare with no expectation of a return. But when Perseus entered the palace, head up, posture radiating defiance, Polydectes' mockery curdled into a nervous twitch. "So, you've brought me a gift," the king sneered, voice trembling just enough to betray the crack in his composure. Perseus met his gaze with a quiet nod. "A token of your request," he replied. "No more, no less." With emotion both casual and final, Perseus untied the satchel and revealed Medusa's head. For the briefest heartbeat, Polydectes locked eyes with her. It was a glance, barely a moment. That was all it took. Stone bloomed across his flesh, crawling like winter across a lake. His eyes froze wide in a tableau of terror and disbelief. His final breath snagged behind lips instantly carved to granite. The mighty king, so fond of cruelty, now immortalized as a monument to his own arrogance. The palace erupted into chaos. Courtiers shrieked and scattered, sandals slapping against marble in their haste to flee. Some collapsed in awe or terror, while others simply ran. Perseus stood motionless amid the storm, his face unreadable. Into this riot rushed his mother, Danae, arms outstretched, clinging to him, free at last from the king's threat. Perseus remained silent, saying nothing about the cave, nothing about the girl behind the legend. To the world, Medusa existed only as a monster vanquished, a tool wielded, an obstacle overcome. No one wondered who she had been. But Perseus remembered. He remembered the way her body fell, the flicker of something pleading, not snarling in her reflection. Yet the story took flight on swifter wings than truth. Ballads sprang up in taverns and market squares. Temples rose, marble and gold, to honor Perseus the Gorgon Slayer, son of gods, breaker of curses. His name was etched into stone, sung by choirs, lauded by priests. Never once did they carve Medusa's name beside his. In his later years, Perseus, ever the dutiful hero, placed Medusa's head upon Athena's shield, as the goddess demanded. The aegis, once a symbol of wisdom and protection, now bore the petrified face of the woman he had slain. Her features, twisted forever in agony or rage, depending on who was telling it, became a weapon of divine justice, or at least justice for others. Never for her. Even in death, Medusa served. Even in silence, her power lingered. Perseus, golden and untouchable, marched beneath the aegis, winning victories with the face of the woman whose life he'd ended. He was loved, she was feared. Neither could rewrite the roles the gods had assigned. After Perseus' return, Athena summoned him to Olympus. Not for thanks, not really. She wanted what was hers. Not the sword, not the sandals, not the helmet borrowed from Hades. Only the head, the prize. Perseus surrendered the satchel without protest, perhaps relieved to let it go. With the grace of one accustomed to taking what she pleases, Athena took the head of her former priestess and affixed it to her shield. The Gorgon's face, once radiant with devotion, now frozen in a perpetual snarl, became the icon of the goddess's wrath. Wherever Athena strode, war and terror followed. Enemy ranks buckled at the sight of the shield. Cities turned to statues, and the aegis became the stuff of nightmares and coinage alike. Everywhere, her shield gleamed, a warning and a promise. Yet no one stopped to ask why Medusa had been cursed to begin with. Athena, goddess of wisdom, paraded the face of the woman she had punished, not as a lesson, nor as a memorial, but as a symbol of what happens when mortals trespass in the realm of gods. Still, not everyone bought the official story. In the shadows and corners of myth, whispers grew. Some claimed Athena hadn't claimed a weapon, but had granted Medusa a sort of immortality. That, by setting her on the aegis, Athena ensured Medusa could never be erased, not even by divine decree. The girl whose prayers once echoed in empty temples was now etched into eternity. Even the gods could not walk free of the consequences they had conjured. But the truth, as always, was a tangle of contradiction. Athena, who had cursed Medusa for shaming her temple, now wielded that same shame as a trophy. The transformation was complete. Priestess, then victim, then monster, then weapon, now legend. And yet, somewhere in the curve of Medusa's jaw, in the haunted set of her petrified gaze, something survived, something the world refused to forget. Because even as she turned armies to stone, there were always a few who looked and saw not a monster, but a question, sometimes a protest, sometimes a warning. That was a power no sword could rival. Medusa's face, set into Athena's aegis, stared outward, unblinking and eternal. To most, it was terror incarnate, the last thing seen by the unlucky. But for those willing to look past the surface, her gaze held more than rage. It held memory. It held injustice. It held the truth that no temple inscription dared risk. Through centuries, soldiers marched behind the aegis, utterly unaware that the face they wielded once belonged to a woman who had never raised a weapon. Her curse, first a punishment, then a tool of empire, was now deployed to win wars and crush resistance. Yet still, her eyes watched. Long after her voice was silenced, Medusa's gaze bore witness to the endless parade of violence. She saw kings rise, temples decay, heroes sour and turn cruel. She watched men build statues of themselves, men who had called her monster, while women, always women, left tiny tributes at hidden shrines. Sometimes a clay serpent, sometimes a lock of hair, sometimes just a whispered name in the dark. Not out of fear, but to remember. Because before Medusa became a cautionary tale, she was a protector. Her cave, for all its horrors, was a sanctuary, as much as a tomb, a place men learned too late to fear, a place where the hunted could not be touched. As generations passed, her legend splintered. To some, she never changed. The Gorgon, the monster, the ultimate test for any would-be hero. Her head became a talisman, nailed above doorways, painted on armor, pressed into coins. Soldiers carried her image into battle, convinced her legend would strike terror deeper than any spear. But another version of her story began to spread, softer and slower, whispered by poets, philosophers, and those whose names never made it into the official scrolls. In this telling, Medusa was not a beast, but a woman wronged, punished for beauty, exiled for a crime she did not choose. This version did not shout. It murmured. It asked uncomfortable questions. Why did a goddess of wisdom punish her own devotee? Why did the god of the sea face no consequence? Why did men hunt her for glory when all she wanted was solitude? In backrooms, in libraries, in the shadowed corners of temples, these questions grew like wildflowers in the cracks of marble. And little by little, Medusa's image shifted once more. She became a mirror, not of terror, but of courage and truth. Women began to see themselves in her, survivors of violence, victims of silence, those forced to wear the label of monster just for existing. Her snakes became not a curse, but a crown. Her eyes, not a punishment, but a shield forged out of betrayal. Even now, in modern art and stories, Medusa rises again, not to petrify, but to bear witness. She stares from canvases and murals, her expression a mixture of grief, rage, and resilience. Her myth is retold not to glorify Perseus, but to ask why we ever called him a hero, and who gets to decide who is monster and who is victim. Because myths are living things, as changeable as the people who tell them. Sometimes the real monster is not the one with fangs and serpents, but the one with a sword and a story to sell. In every generation that dares to question, Medusa blinks, just once. And in that blink, someone new begins to see. Empires collapse, gods fade, and the world is rewritten. But Medusa endures, not as flesh and blood, but as a symbol, as a shadow, as an unblinking question that stares back from history's deepest well. Her marble face migrates across centuries and civilizations, From Byzantium to Rome, her legend threading through every culture that inherited the myth. And with time, the story splits again. In one telling, she is forever the monster, the serpent-haired killer, the ultimate test for any hero. Her head remains a ward against evil, suspended above gates and forged into shields. But in another, softer current, she is something else. A voice for the wronged, a symbol of power reclaimed. This story is passed from poet to philosopher, from mother to daughter, whispered in places the official version never touches. Here Medusa is not slain, but mourned, not feared but remembered. Her snakes, her eyes, her ruined innocence. These become badges, not brands, and each time her myth is retold by someone brave enough to ask, was she really the monster? Medusa lives again, not in terror, but in truth. So as the centuries roll on, and the faces on coins fade, and the marble gods gather dust, Medusa's story waits. She waits for the next person to question, the next to remember, the next to look into her eyes and see not a curse but a challenge. Because sometimes all it takes to break the spell is to ask the right question. And in that moment, the woman beneath the legend blinks, and the world begins to change.